I want to talk about three things, and I'm not sure how related they are, but I'll try and go in order so that they relate to each other a bit. One is just things that have been on my mind lately when not working on heat signature, like between working on it and thinking about it. And I'm always trying to like get a handle on what it is and what it's becoming and what's good about it, and I try and relate it to things. I have this document of ideas for games. That ideas is in some cases too strong a word. It's more like sort of themes. The document is called something like game inspiration snippets, like tiny, like, or a sentence, or like an image I found on the internet or something. Like, could there be a game a bit like this? And every now and then I write an extra sentence on that one, and every now and then add a new one. And there are loads of like quite specific ideas in there, but then there's also the vaguest two. I want to talk about both of those. And one of them is just a game that is a sort of framework into which I can put story. A game that just basically serves as a vehicle for writing. Like if I want to write a bunch of stories, here's a game where the writing can just plug in and not interfere with the game itself too much. And I can write as much or as little as I like, and I can be fairly free with what kind of stories I want to come up with. So like design the game in such a way that it's built to be very flexible in terms of what kind of stories you can tell about. And like Gunpoint is not too far off this in terms of, just to give a specific example of the kind of thing I'm thinking about. Gunpoint was just like you play a mission and then you have the story afterwards and before the next one. And the story is very separate from the gameplay, and it doesn't matter if the gameplay doesn't relate to the story too much. It did a little bit in terms of like the tile set of the level. If you're fictionally you're supposed to break into a police station, it has to be a police type level. But every story was basically get to this computer and get this bit of information. And only once or twice did anything from the story actually appear inside the level and sort of have any real specific tie. Gunpoint is not the ideal game for this though, because it was handcrafted puzzles, and as well as being time consuming to make and playtest and refine, I also only have a limited number of those that I want to make. One of the reasons Gunpoint is the length it is that I didn't have any more ideas really. Like if I'd spent another year on it, I mean, A, I would have been bored out of my mind. But B, I wasn't sitting there thinking, such a shame I ran out of time for all these cool puzzle ideas. I did think, it's a shame I didn't get to add these several gadgets and features and mechanics, but I didn't have like particular puzzles I wanted to make for those. So it's not that great for like tell as much story as you want, because I would run out of puzzles long before I ran out of story. And coming up with new ones is a lot of effort. So Heat Signature is also not that game. I still don't know if I'll plug story into it. I'm sort of, these days I'm feeling less and less like I want to, because it's taken so long to get them, just the game itself there. But I might rethink that. And it's not, I think even less so than Gunpoint, it's not a good vehicle for this, because the world is so consistent and so coherent. It's all one big seamless thing, and it's always going and it's always there, and so it's hard to kind of tell a story that doesn't tie into that. If I want to tell a story about, even if I tell a very personal story, it kind of has to happen in some kind of context, like the characters in it will have to have come from somewhere and live somewhere, and I don't know much about the galaxy that it's taking place in, because it's randomly generated and you can affect it in lots of different ways, so it's not that great for that. So that's a thing that I'll be thinking about next, I think, is probably the next game I make might be built to support story in a more flexible way, such that it's very easy to add new story to it. I can just write a new story and have it be a playable chunk of game in a very short space of time. Procedural generation is a good way of doing this. Would form part of a good solution to this. I have to be careful with phrasing. So with Heat Signature I went so far in the procedural direction that it's not so good for story. And in Gunpoint it's too far in the handcrafted direction to be good for story, for an infinite amount of story. And so what I'd like to do at some point is make a game where, yes, at the drop of a hat I can generate a level and I can give it parameters as to like what kind of tile set it needs and what kind of various things that do need to make sense for the story that I'm going to write for it, but that's the work of 5 minutes. It's like just make sure it's police, make sure it's this big, make sure the objective is to kill someone or not to kill someone, or this, and then all I got to do is write this script, and I'm pretty fast at writing scripts, and Gunpoint already has a language for doing that, and I can write a better language for sure. So it'd be cool to do that at some point. I'm not sure why I'm thinking about that. I guess it was just to kind of think about this question of story and heat signature. If it does go in there at all, how much of it should there be? And the answer is like not a huge, crazy amount. And right next to that thought of a game that is, my lights just went dim, which does not normally happen. Right next to the thought of like a game that's designed to support lots of story and be a vehicle for story is a game that is a vehicle for mechanics ideas. So something like Gunpoint ended up centering around the crosslink, which is one mechanic, and then there are lots of gadgets you can buy. They tend to just sort of change the way crosslink works in some fairly small way. And there are other ones that just sort of, they're like perks kind of, they're not really like big, huge new mechanics in themselves. So it really just has the one main mechanic. There are lots of like jumping and punching is obviously its own thing. But Gunpoint is definitely not a good vehicle for mechanics. Like even just those little perk upgrade things really are a big design problem with the game. People didn't really complain about it that much, but or hardly at all actually. But when I look at Gunpoint, I think, how would I redesign this if I was doing it today? I think I wouldn't have a gadget shop from which you can buy all these gadgets, and then a string of missions where I don't know what gadgets you have. I mean, I can check, do you have this gadget, but the sequence of missions you play is independent of the gadgets that you own. You do have to earn money, and you can they can cost a certain amount. But in general, I can't. When I make a mission, I don't know if you have the Hush Cracker, I don't know if you have the Prank Spasm, I don't know if you have the Long Shot. And that fundamentally changes the nature of the puzzles. Even the smallest sort of upgrades change what solutions you can do, and it's very, very hard to make puzzles without knowing what abilities the player has. So that was a bad fit, the sort of freely upgradable mechanics with pre-made puzzles and no link between them. If I was going to do it that way, if I was going to do something like that in future, I would make it so that buying upgrades and playing and getting access to missions was linked in some way. So you need the Prank Spasm to do these missions, and then those missions can be about the Prank Spasm. But I'm not that interested in handcrafting puzzles ever again, really. So, what heat signature might be this game? The game that is a great vehicle for mechanics, because what I found when I started to add some of the ideas that, out at Stugan, I added just loads of mechanics. I added like grenades and teleporters and a bunch of other things that have been long planned, and I always knew I was going to do them, and the game suddenly started to really click, and it really started to feel like a game where you invent your own solutions, and it feels very rich and more systemic, even though the systems have not changed really. The sort of, things like when you throw a grenade against a wall and it bounces, I didn't have to code that when I added grenades. That was already in there from just the way, just general ship physics. And obviously grenades themselves are a new mechanic, but lots of things kind of just neatly tie together and reuse code. When a grenade goes up, if you throw a jacker grenade at something, everything in that radius becomes hijacked and works for you, and that's the same way that a jacker gizmo works, that you just click on something and it just hijacks that one thing. And so that code can be the same. And it's quite easy to add these things. Mechanics-wise, it's pretty easy to add them. They add a lot, and they don't like break a puzzle, because there are no pre-made puzzles, and they also don't really unbalance the game really, because I'm not adding gadgets to your starting inventory. I'm adding gadgets that can be found out there in the world, and what you find will be very different on each time you play, and looking for the things that you want and piecing together this inventory of kit that is going to work well for you, I think is quite a fun thing to do. And it's got this nice mix of intentionality and randomness. Like what you find is random, what you choose to keep is intentional, and so you will both have ideas for builds and go out and make them happen, and you will also be kind of spurred to try new builds by the game, by just the fact that, shit, all I found was a swapper teleporter, which I wouldn't normally use, and a Frazzler grenade, which I wouldn't normally use, and now I've got to solve this puzzle with just those two things. So that's cool. And yeah, so it's really easy to add these things, and I have loads of ideas for them, and they don't really break the game if they turn out to be... It doesn't even matter if they're underpowered as well, because you don't have to keep them. You can just sell them, and the worst thing that can happen is it wasn't worth me spending that time to make that thing work. If the idea turns out not to be as powerful as I thought. But then a lot of ideas, if it's exciting enough for me to make it in the first place, there's probably some situation where it's really useful. And so as long as that situation exists, and as long as the item exists, then one day those two things can come together, and someone will be stuck at the end of a corridor and realise, like, I don't think there's any way out of this, unless this thing that I picked up like 3 minutes ago that I've never used before would let me lay a trap down here, and then I can use my teleporter to get out of here, and then I can fire this gun to lure the guards into here, and then teleport out when they come, and then the trap gets them, and I don't know. Stuff like that. So that's cool. It's tricky. It's not what I had in mind when I wrote down that idea of like a game that's just designed to showcase these mechanics and to support as many different mechanics as possible, because it's like 3 years of work, and it's this big... Heating Jet often feels unwieldy to me because I spent so long on it, so there's so much code there, and also because it doesn't run that brilliantly on my laptop if you have like a really big ship or you have multiple ships on screen at once. And that weighs heavily on my on how much I enjoy the game, how excited I am about the game, which is silly because most people are not going to be running the game on a MacBook Air. And I'm going to do some kind of optimization, I don't know. I'm going to desperately try and not do that myself. But the end result is like 90% of people are going to play this game are probably going to be playing on a fast gaming PC that's way way more powerful than it needs to be to play this game. So the fact that it feels slow to me at times is completely illusory. It's just a consequence of the laptop I'm going to be making on. I can make it on my desktop, but it's just I don't like sitting down, and it's harder to convert my gaming sort of setup into a standing desk that I can then switch back to a non-standing desk. So it's just a really dull practical problem. So yeah, Heating Tree can definitely be that game, and I think it will be. And more than that, it also, something I hadn't thought about much until I started working on what I'm currently working on, which is, I'm just going to see how long I've been talking, 13 minutes. So the thing I'm working on at the moment is mission generation, and in particular sort of making it all make sense. So it's got to spawn a ship in the right place, it's got to be the right faction, and then you go there and you do that mission. And when you trip an alarm, that ship is going to set course to the nearest station, and that means you've got that long to escape. So if a ship is very close to a station, you have a very short amount of time to escape if you trip the alarm, and if it's very far away, you've got a long time to escape. And those are two different kinds of missions, really. Like, one is very forgiving of alarms, one is not. There's also missions where the ship that you're going to board is already heading to a station before you even get there, so the time limit is just there, whether you trip an alarm or not. If you do trip an alarm, it will accelerate because it wants to get there quicker. But yeah, you've got a limited window of opportunity. And those are three different kinds of missions, really. Like, there's the close orbit, which means there's no time limit, but if you do trip an alarm, you've got a very short amount of time to get out. There's the sort of static deep space ship, which is miles from any station and not doing anything, so there's no time limit, and even if you do trip an alarm, you've got time to recover and still perform your mission. And then there's the transit ships, which are ones that are already on their way somewhere, and so there's a time limit, but it will usually be pretty big. I think I'm going to go for like 3 to 5 minutes or something, which is a long time in Heat Signature. You can fly somewhere, do a mission, fail a mission, try it again several times over in the space of 3 to 5 minutes. And the way the game currently generates ships to match a difficulty level is that you pass at a difficulty level, you say, I want a hard ship, please, and it says, okay, if it's hard, it has somewhere between this many guards and this many guards, and they have this chance of being shielded and this chance of being armoured, and the ship is going to be this big. And I think I'm going to change that, if it's not too much work, to... It's going to be a bit tricky because I do want to ensure you always have an easy, medium and hard mission to choose from, as well as some random ones that are, might be super hard or might be another easy one. But what I'd like to do is just randomise those things almost independently. So this ship has a lot of guards in each zone, but it only has one zone. And they're all armoured, but none of them are shielded. And all the doors are locked, but it's a deep space ship that's not going anywhere, so you've got as long as you like to do it. And that's a combination of all these different factors, all of which I can have the power to just specify. I can pass those things to my ship generator and just say, this is what I want, and it will do it and make it work and make it completable. And then equally you could have a ship that's like, I want it to be actually really easy in terms of the guards. There'll be very few of them that don't have regular equipment, but the ship is huge and it has in some way like trickier security, like the first door is already locked, so you've got to find a way to get past the first door without having a key card. That one doesn't sound as compelling as I'm saying it. It can have like heat sensors, so it's hard to board, but then once you're aboard it's quite easy. And then that can also be mixed with, and this one happens to be on its way somewhere already, so you've got a time limit. So it's like not too many guards, but it's going to be very difficult to get through the ship quickly and get to your objective and do it. And so that feels like a cool thing. And then there's another aspect to it that I can randomise, which is playstyle requirements. I'm a little undecided on exactly how much to sort of, on the distinction between requirements and bonuses and then personal taste. But, so by playstyle I mean things like do it without killing anyone, or do it without ever being seen, or maybe even do it quickly when, separately from the whether or not ship has a time limit. Or like get this target and make sure the target doesn't die. It doesn't matter about anyone else. So right now there are already like capture and assassinate missions, and so obviously a capture mission is one where the target cannot die, or must not die rather. But I would like to also, at the very least, when you're working for the off-world faction, you will not be allowed to kill anyone because they are strictly against killing. And so that one has to be mandatory. Should I also have optional like bonuses for, let's say like Sovereign kind of want you to not get spotted and it's not mission over if you are, but they'll give you a bonus if you're not. Or I almost feel you can achieve the same thing by having the mission generator generate one mission that's for Sovereign where it's fine to get spotted, and another mission that's for Sovereign where it's similar difficulty except that you mustn't be spotted, and that one offers more money. Because then you're deciding ahead of time whether you want to be whether you want to do it without being spotted at all. And that is much simpler to do. I can do that much quicker. But the only question is like it's not quite as good, because the nice thing about a bonus is that it gives you a broader failure spectrum. You can have that critical tense moment of, oh god, am I going to fuck this up? And then you can fuck it up, and then you can still carry on because you haven't failed the mission, you've just failed the bonus condition. And so I guess I like optional objectives, but I think I need more of them, because Off-World are going to have this hard and fast mandatory playstyle requirement, and then most of the other factions, Sovereign would definitely never have a bonus to not hurt anyone because they are just ruthless. Glitches and Foundry maybe could, and it could be dependent on like, we don't want to start a war or something, so try to do this with minimal violence. And then time, and then I have to think out what the other bonus requirements could be. So, but that's another kind of modifier or mutator, another fly in the ointment, and I'm quite excited about the idea of mixing all these things together, of the weird contraptions and items you find that kind of determine what your set of abilities are, again as a mix of randomness and your own intention, combined with a more random difficulty system where instead of just all hardships having roughly the same hardships, all difficult ships having for sure armoured guards and for sure a lot of guards and definitely heat sensors. Instead, finding ships that have some weird combination of like a lot of guards but very small, or a lot of guards but none of them have good armour. And then mixing with also on this mission, there's a bonus for not hurting anyone. And also on this mission, it happens to be going to a station, and so there's a time limit. And all those things mixing together, I feel like that's got a lot of potential to kind of create a lot of different new experiences. And it feels like a good fit for an immersive sim, because immersive sims are all about supporting different play styles. And traditionally, they've been handcrafted. I think that all the major ones I can think of are handcrafted. And so it's a huge amount of work to make sure that this one mission, here's how you can do it, but then here's this other way you can also do it, and we've got to make sure manually that it's possible to do it that way. And then I think I got to think about this because of Dishonored 2, because Dishonored 2 wants to make your playstyles mean something. There's very different outcomes depending on high chaos and low chaos, and then there's decisions to make for each of the targets, whether you kill them or don't kill them. And those have narrative consequences as well, like some of the non-lethal options have extra consequences for how the game ends, independent of high chaos and low chaos. It's good, but it always feels like it's fudging it. It always feels like it's really mashing together, like, the fact that you've killed a lot of people means that if you install a puppet leader in a certain position of power, then it's assumed that that puppet leader will also be running the place like a total dictator and be an asshole about it. Whereas if you haven't killed many people, it's assumed that that person will behave differently, which is weird, really. Like they may not even know how many people you killed. It tries to tie everything all together, and the more I think about it, the more I think that a game that wants to support lots of different playstyles and in some cases reward them and in some cases not, and also give the player a lot of freedom to do it, really suits random generation, because then you can... it doesn't matter if you one day generate a mission that can't be done in a non-lethal way, as long as the player has some warning about that and can choose not to do that mission. If you have infinite missions, then they can have all these different variables and all these different things going into them, and you can have that really broad scope of experiences without having to do much work to generate them. Well, it was a huge amount of work to write a mission generator, but now that that's done, I feel like there's a lot of potential for me to like support a lot of different experiences and make it a very broad and hopefully interesting game. I was making this video to kind of like figure out what I need to do next and clarify what I need to work on, but really now that I've done it, I feel like this video is there to reassure me that I'm like working on something that's interesting and that will end up working. And I think I've done that, so I'm going to stop.